I want to give a shout out to my brother Yusuf. Happy birthday to you. And my baby sister Jackie, she will have a birthday in 2 days too. And then our father will have one in another week and a half. Boy, we've got a cluster of Librans in our home. But happy birthday to you, Yusuf. And happy birthday to all the Librans in the house. That's right. Sending everybody so much love today. We've got a lot that we're going to be talking about today. There's been a lot happening on, well, first of all, let me give you greetings from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars. Hey, Ashley, down there in Memphis, and you said, and Macon and Mason, Tennessee, and Dave Dowling, and sending everybody so much love today. Andre, Robert, everybody like and share, like and share, like and share. We are going to be talking about what's been happening in Wisconsin with the Republicans. They promised not only chaos, but the progressive Democrats who did run, they said, well, when you run, we will get you put out of office. And the biggest race that we have seen has been the justice who was elevated to the Supreme Court. Of course, that race was historic. Uh, Justice Protasiewicz got a tremendous majority, a decisive majority, and they are actively working to put her out. And there's a lot else that is going on in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin really is a harbinger of things to come, state to state to state to state, because that's what Republicans are doing. They are going from the grassroots up, from the root to the fruit. They're like, in 2008, they said you can have the presidency. Remember? We have to get Dave Daly back on to talk about his book, Rat Eft. Yeah, they said, but what we're going to do is seize America state by state by state, local, county, state offices. Remember, Congress, both houses, that is determined by the state legislature of their state. So lots going on, and we're seeing a lot of these fights manifest in Wisconsin. John Nichols of the Nation magazine will be talking about it. There's another fight about masks from the CDC, another fight, another discrepancy on how masks are to be worn or what masks are safest. I want to know what you think about that. I mean, it's a big, big, big fight right now. A big, big fight. And the CDC, well, they could have public hearings, and Nurses United, the largest nursing union in the United States, they said, let us have a public meeting, a public discussion, a public debate about these masks. We've heard that the gold standard are the N95 masks. The CDC is waffling on it. They're like, no, you can actually wear the other mask and you'll be okay. And they're like, whoa, with endemic um, illnesses that are out here now, how are we supposed to be safe? And also, how's everybody else supposed to be safe? Mm. And then police are making it much harder for even the press to come and report on crimes that happen, or they might, I mean, just incidents. They are blocking the press state by state from uh, from taking pictures, from reporting on anything involving the police. You can't make this stuff up, but we have to bring all this stuff out here today on the Santita Jackson Show. So everybody, please like and share, like and share, like and share. I'm sending you much love today. Like and share, like and share. Let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Congress has less than 5 days to prevent a government shutdown. Lawmakers return to Washington today with no deal in sight ahead of Saturday's deadline to find an agreement to fund the government. House Republicans have been unable to agree on a short term path forward. However, the Senate will start moving ahead with its own solution. Will that work? Many people are wondering if Speaker McCarthy will choose keeping his job. This is the deal that he cut with the Republicans in January, or saving the country. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, says these government shutdowns always hurt Republicans. But what do you think is going to happen? You have some Democrats. He has allegedly at least 159 solid votes, and he can get some Democrats to cross over to his side if he works with the leader, Hakeem Jeffries, the man who would be Speaker. In fact, he got more votes affirming his speakership before Mr. McCarthy was able to secure it. So we're going to be looking at that, because that's a big, 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 big deal. President Biden will meet striking auto workers in Michigan today. Not only will he meet them, he will be walking on the picket lines with them to show support for workers, according to this Washington Post report. Picketing the big three automakers, it may be the first ever visit to a strike by a sitting president. Former President Donald Trump will skip a Republican primary debate to deliver a speech in Michigan. The UAW union has not endorsed either candidate. The UAW extended its picketing to 38 locations Friday, targeting Stellantis and GM. It cited progress in talks with Ford, and they are also laying off workers. Stellantis, which was Chrysler, GM, and Ford, as this strike continues to go forward. Senator Robert Menendez brushed off calls for him to resign. This is interesting, everybody. This powerful New Jersey Democrat used to be the head of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate, very, very powerful. Last week, a federal indictment alleged that he and his wife accepted bribes in exchange for exerting his political influence. He said he will continue to serve in the Senate. He said that yesterday in a press conference. So why don't you call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. I want to know what you think should happen here. Do you think that he should continue to serve? I mean, call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. I mean, what happened to the concept of innocent until proven guilty? I mean, I don't care what it looks like. I mean, I personally think he should be allowed to serve until he has been taken to trial and found guilty. But you have more and more senators, and you have more and more uh, members of the House of Representatives, Democrats, who are saying that he needs to resign. It looks bad, da 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 da. But what if it were them? What if it were they who were under this microscope? I'm not taking up for anyone. I'm just talking about principle. Why don't you call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT? What should happen to Senator Robert Menendez? Should he be forced to resign, or should the wheels of justice be allowed to turn and he get his day in court? That's what this is supposed to be about, right? So I want you to call me. I personally think he needs to have his day in court. I don't care what it looks like. Yeah, it doesn't look good, but he said he has been pulling money from his savings account to have cash because his family's from Cuba, and he has lived through the confiscation of your cash. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if you've ever had the computer system in your bank go down. And I love my bank, but sometimes things don't work. And what if you didn't have access to your cash? Do you think it's smart for us just to be dependent upon the digital space to get our money? And you if you get a certain amount, if you go over a certain amount in a bank, the bank is holding your money. You must fill out papers and tell them why you need your money. Think about that. I mean, how free are we really? Just think about that. Call me at 773-763-9278. But the question is, for me, should he be allowed to serve while you don't even have a jury in his trial. They've not even set a trial date. He should just resign and wait for that? Nah, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that they just need to go on and let him do it. How many of us remember The Man from Uncle? Yes, David McCallum, the Scottish actor who starred in it. And of course, he was also in NCS. He starred in this iconic 1960s spy series. He made his transition, everybody. He made his transition. They said he died surrounded by family in a New York hospital. And may God bless him. Hundreds of colleges will make financial aid offers more transparent. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Shanina Knighton, before we get into some other things today, how are you doing? I am doing fine. I want to talk to you, of course, have an extended conversation to you about masks. It's something that you have really helped to guide us on, because many of us didn't even know before we started talking to you and listening to you that that you didn't wear masks for 12 hours, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, and on and on and on. You said, no, no, there are instructions that come with masks, and many of us didn't even think about that, didn't even know about it. You didn't even grab it from the box. Oftentimes they're just available in these stations where you can just pick up a mask, no instructions. They just say put them on. They don't tell you how. They don't tell you how to remove them. But, there are things. There are ways to do this. But now there are. We're looking at a lot of. We have a lot of vaccines that are out now, and now they're saying that, that it is. That pregnant women can get vaccinated for this, that, and the other, and is there and of course our children. I know I asked you about this yesterday, but I want some clarity. This is the start of that season where people are getting vaccinated for pneumonia, for the flu, for all kinds of things. Uh, how do you have that conversation with your doctor about how to start uh, the process and the protocol? And are there some that you can say, well, I don't think I want to take this one, I'll take that one? Is it a la carte, or do you just have to take them all? It's very. Oh, but if I can interrupt you here, you said something that kind of took me back a bit. Um, you often say that you say it all the time that we need to be the CEOs of our own health, and you're saying that the doctors should not be ordering you. You ask them for their recommendations, and then you make the decision. Yes. Well, the fact that we have that much power is, I think it's news to a lot of us, because many of us, look, having gone through school, people like you, and I'm putting you on the spot here, those who are, particularly those who are scientifically inclined, those who become doctors. You're not a physician, but you are a doctor. You're a registered nurse. I mean, you all are like the brightest kids in the class, right? And then we've also been trained, and it's, psychologically, your doctor calls you by your first name. You call them Doctor So and So. I'm so glad I have my primary care physician, calls me Miss Jackson. I call her, Doctor. That's that. And I always appreciated that because it was putting us on equal footing, and most of us don't have that experience, Dr. Knighton. And so we walk in already behind the eight ball, a little intimidated by doctors. Not a little, but a lot. They know much more than we do, but the fact is, the person who knows your body better than you do is you. Oh yeah. Well, okay, now that's new. Okay, all right. That's rich. That's rich, and it's true. How about that, everybody? How about that? Your doctor works for you. Think about that. Your doctor works for you. And so, gonna get this right. Gonna get your that now. All right. Dr. Knight, you said your doctor works for you. You do not work for them. I want you to give that word on the other side. People couldn't hear you, but we were able to work that out. I was able to work it out. Your doctor works for you. So when you are looking at this, all of these, just medicine, period, or any kind of medical procedure, uh, you're the one who needs to be interviewing the doctor, asking the questions. You're the CEO of your health. They are part of your team. You're not part of their team. Remember that, everybody. Let's talk about this fight that is going on with nurses and the CDC. National Nurses United, the largest nursing union in the United States, they're taking on the CDC. They said, look, you're giving us mixed signals about these masks. Once again, we're not going to do that. It's making people sick. It's making people sick. And Dr. Knighton is going to repeat just very, very briefly what she said to us in this segment about the power that you have to determine what medicines you take, any of them, what procedures you sign up for, all of that. You're the one who tells your doctor what it is that you want them to do, not the opposite. Your doctor's not supposed to order you around. If that's what you have with a physician, let them go. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Dr. Knight.
WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. See how ComEd is preparing our public schools for a clean energy future at ComEd.com/public schools.
This is Gary Menzel from Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11. I've been asked, what is the difference between a union roofer and a non-union roofer?
Oh, yeah,
both start their day the same way. Get dressed, pack a lunch,
I had briefly went on mute, so
that's where the similarities end.
Okay.
A union roofer knows their workplace will be safe. They'll receive a fair living wage. If there's an illness or accident in their family, they can go see the doctor because they have employer-provided health insurance.
Okay?
The non-union roofer may not have any safety protocols at their workplace. Their health insurance, if it is offered to them, is taken out of their paycheck, and their wages will most likely be 20% less than the union
so that
roofer.
I can hear the doctor.
A union represents and negotiates on behalf of their members to ensure
thank you so much.
a living wage, family health benefits, and a dignified retirement. And now, the recent passage of the Workers' Rights Amendment.
Okay, great. Woo. Thank you so much.
Sure thing. Sorry, that was I forgot to take that off in the morning.
Hey, don't worry about it. Things happen. I was just saying we couldn't we couldn't hear. I couldn't hear her. I was like, oh.
Hey, look, I said I'm fighting with your printer in the morning hearing, or I'm fighting with the commercials.
Honey, I am so sorry, but you know me, I start printing and I'm looking, because I'm looking for stories straight through. I'm looking for stories and to confirm straight through the show, So I am always on here, but when I move, and I'm going to be moving fairly soon, I am going to have a different setup.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go to LaserJet. But that's all right.
Come on, upgrade.
Upgrade. You're talking about someone who, you know what? I'm going to send you this article about how our children, U.S. school kids and hospital patients and prison inmates share food poisoning. They're being given food that's right on the precipice of going bad. And there's this huge photograph of this. Oh, well, of course, you know this better than anyone.
Look, I'm from the poorest city, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, the largest poorest city, I should say. And so, trust me, like it's interesting because the stuff that people be shocked about, I'm not shocked about.
Well, that's why we're talking about it, because a lot of people are. I mean, I see some things. Ooh,
I know. I loved the show yesterday, by the way, because that's a topic that I promise you I was so happy that the guests that you had on the show touched upon, because it's just not being talked about enough. And it's impacting so many different households. And when you literally are trying to manage these social, emotional issues of a child, and it's beyond your control, because school is supposed to be an extension of home. It's literally you trying to ease the home environment. And it's one thing for your kids to have to deal with stuff socially at school, but then now they got to deal with the fact that they don't even have teachers or consistent teachers to help them process that.
Gosh.
It's crazy, the lack of developmental support that they're getting now because they can't keep consistent educators.
Well, because they don't want to educate these kids. They don't want to educate these kids. That's the
30
thing.
seconds.
They don't want to educate them.
Yeah, I've heard some disturbing. I'm talking about I've been inside of the schools doing blood pressures, heights, and weights, and I've heard some disturbing things. I've heard teachers, and honestly, I ain't gonna even say teachers, because the one thing he brought up is the fact that they might get teachers that are right out of
10 seconds.
college, but then there's also let's say teachers' aides, there's volunteers.
Well, many of them are. Well,
Stand
you
by.
know what? I tell you what. In prep schools, they don't have underqualified teachers, and that's its own thing.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show on WCBT 820. We're going to be talking about really about police now restricting the right to listen in on their radio waves. And that's happening to a lot of, where's that happening? That's happening all over the country, quite frankly. So, when the press want to show up at the scene of a crime, they're being prevented from doing that. And not just examining the crime, but examining the behavior of the police. Yeah, that's happening right now. But also, we're going to be talking about what's happening in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is under fire. So let's talk about that. The GOP are going after these Democrats who've been newly elected. Boy, you can't make this stuff up. And guess what? It's not just happening in Wisconsin, but Wisconsin's just to the north of us. So why not look at them? Because it is really, really deliberate. But, we were talking with Dr. Knighton in the previous segment. Many of you couldn't hear that. I'm so sorry about that. But I wanted her to encapsulate what she was saying to us before we talk about this fight that Nurses United, that nurses are waging against the CDC on our behalf. They're worried that the guidelines from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, might reduce protection against the coronavirus and other illnesses because of because of this confusing information they're giving us about masks, which of course Dr. Knighton gave us much clarity about on masks at the height of the pandemic. We didn't even know that masks came with instructions. We now know that the gold standard has been the N95. They say, not really. What are you talking about? But before we do that, I want to kind of wrap up what, if you can, in a nutshell, say what you told us in the prior segment, Dr. Knighton, just about us being the CEOs of our own health. And, I mean, when we're told about different treatments, I would say even for cancer, for anything, when you're told about medicines that you can take, which they advertise all over television, when you're talking about these different vaccine schedules, I mean, because we're offered up vaccines for everything, for pneumonia, which is really serious, for the flu, which can be very serious for a lot of people. You're saying, wait a minute, first of all, you have the right to say yay or nay to any of these treatments or medicines, because now we're finding that when you go to the doctor might prescribe a medicine for you, and now the pharmacies are refusing to distribute these different medicines. So it's just, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of subjectivity in what should be an objective field. So what does the patient have the right to say yes or no to, Dr. Knighton, before we go on to what the nurses are talking about?
So I just want to be clear that as a medical professional, we are given a set of skills, a set of information and knowledge to be able to assist people with making the best decision for their care. When it comes down to someone being ill, they very well may not understand why they're ill, and so someone may be there to assist them with the diagnosis as well as assist them with treatment. What that means is providing information as well as providing care for what they deem to be best for the patient. However, I always tell individuals that no one knows their body more than them. Meaning, so for example, you may be feeling off, and this has happened to people, where you may have been feeling off, you may not understand what's going on, and literally a doctor may look at you and tell you that nothing's wrong, and then something might legitimately be wrong, right? And so you listening to that individual, unfortunately, has led to a lot of people having adverse effects. People have gone home and died. People have had more complicated situations because they trusted the word of a provider. But again, you know your body, you know when you're feeling off. And oftentimes, if you are relying only on the sole decision of a provider, that could be a difference between life and death. It could be a difference between you seeking treatment that could save your life early on. And so what I said is that, yes, you pay insurance, whether it's your taxes, whether, it's subsidized, whatever the case may be, your providers work for you, meaning that it is their intent, it is their job, and it is their duty to protect you, to keep you safe, and to make sure that they are educating you so that you are at the optimal level of health. Anytime that you have a provider where they feel as if they own you, if they feel as if they have control over you, and they feel as though if you do not take your advice, then it's my way or the highway, I'm going to encourage you to seek out another provider, because it should be a partnership. It should not be a dictatorship when it comes to your body and when it comes to your health. You are the CEO of your own health.
All right, everybody, be in charge. And you know what? You should know your body. And you should trust your own instincts about your body. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. Many of us find out that we have all kinds of illnesses because we trusted ourselves and we were insistent upon being treated by doctors. And I don't care whether you have premium insurance, I mean, the top insurance or not. You should make sure that you get the treatment that you need, or that you get the exams that you need, that you get the tests that you need, because it could be a matter of life and not living. So let's talk about these updated CDC mask guidelines. We found that during the pandemic, at the height of it anyway, because we're still really actually in it, Although officially we're not in it. That means we're not getting the monies and all of this other stuff. But you can now get uh, COVID tests uh, if you go to the government, and you can get 4 per household. That having been said, uh, it was Dr. Shanina Knighton, infection preventionist, registered nurse, who told us, hey, you do know that masks come with instructions. Most of us did not. You do know you need to read the box. Most of us have gotten masks from these dispensaries, not from a box. So we didn't know that there's a way to put on a mask, there's a way to remove a mask, there's a length of time to wear a mask. And that some masks are more protective than others. We heard and we began to see that because they were very hard to find, N95 masks were supposed to be the gold standard of masks. I know I searched high and low to find them. And when you were fortunate enough, you bought as many as you could afford. Well, now the CDC is recommending that healthcare workers wear surgical masks when treating patients uh, with, endemic infections like the flu. But they concluded that N95 masks are equivalent to the looser surgical mask, and the nurses are saying, "Whoa, hold on, wait a minute, wait. The newest recommendations hinge on studies, quote, that find no difference in infection rates among health providers who wear N95 masks versus surgical masks in the clinic, close quote." It seems like a contradiction, Dr. Knighton. They're contradicting the CDC's own report from last year that said that N95 masks really do make a big difference, that they significantly cut the risk of infection. What's the deal? And now the Nurses United, your largest nurses union in the United States, they say, look, we need to have a public meeting about this where you get people have public comments, and where people are publicly allowed to ask questions, because you all need to come up with one unified response on these masks. Help me to understand what we're looking at.
So we talking about it's a lot of factors that goes into this, but I'm gonna start with one that's very evident, and that is equity.
Okay.
Equity. So equity being an issue from the standpoint that when the guidelines are put out there and information is done.
Dr. Knighton?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sitting up here trying to communicate with kids because I got kids that act like they don't know what to do right now.
They don't. They need mommy.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So, but saying what it is that I'm saying, when it comes to equity, is that when they're trying to make out guidelines, trying to make out something that literally is operational for everyone. That's the problem, because just because something is a one-size-fits-all model does not necessarily mean it's okay. We saw this early on in the pandemic when it was like, oh, you can use, when it came to masks, it was like, oh, you can reuse masks. Reusing masks is not anything that's ever been accepted in healthcare, because we do understand the risks that are associated with it when you were talking about using one mask going from one patient room to another. But when supplies got low, it came down to having to incorporate practices that were not ethical, that were not just, but it was called an emergency response. So imagine how many individuals were trained during that emergency response, and they were practicing as if that was the initial response, and therefore, even after the pandemic is, let's say, quote unquote, over with, are no longer changing out those masks as they should be. So that's one challenge. The other piece is when we're talking about an N95 mask, I brought this up before. I even had expressed my concerns to Dr. Fur Holden. I had even reached out to the American Nurses Association, because one of my blaring concerns is that when they were trying to give N95 masks to people, the public, was the concern of individuals that are not fit to wear a N95 mask. N95 masks can cause trouble for people with respiratory diseases. So we're talking about somebody with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, somebody with allergies, somebody with asthma. It can cause issues for them in terms of them not being able to breathe. It can further labor their breathing. We also know as well that for prolonged use of N95 masks, that can also lead to CO2 buildup, which can cause headaches. And these are things that have been studied when we talk about complications. And so the reason why you quietly saw that there was a backing off of giving N95 masks to the public was because of the adverse events that were associated with wearing those masks.
Well,
the other piece of it is that when we talk about N95 masks, in order for somebody in healthcare to wear an N95 mask, we have to undergo what's called a fit test, because it's not a one-size-fits-all model. So just because I can put a mask on my face doesn't mean that it's going to provide the proper seal in order for me to be able to keep germs out. So what then happens is, if every facility is not equipped to set every healthcare worker up for a fit test, then that person is getting the same exact outcomes of wearing a surgical mask that they would from an N95 mask. And that requires that they have to put on the mask, and then they put you in PAPR, which is this purified air something machine. Okay, it's a PAPR is what we call it. So they'll put you in that machine and they'll spray this solution. And if you can taste the solution, that means that the actual N95 mask doesn't have a good seal. So, for example, for me, the way that my mouth and my nose is small, I constantly have to wear a PAPR in a patient's room instead of me wearing an N95 mask, because I can taste that solution. And so when these guidelines are being established and they're being made, then they're being made based off of the fact that, hey, is everyone being fit tested to be able to wear an N95? And then are they wearing an N95 properly? Do they have enough equipment in order to make sure that they're only using that same N95 mask for that dedicated patient that they're taking care of and switching it out per shift? So it comes down to equity, as I mentioned, and it also comes down to proper fitting and proper testing. Now, the other issue, and we've talked about this as well, Santita, has been wearing it correctly, right? Like, wearing it correctly is a big thing, and that is my concern of how these guidelines are being made. It's the same thing when they did that Cochrane review and they said that masks don't work. My challenge is even though someone may say, do masks work, the question is, are you cleaning your hands before and after? Are you making sure that you're wearing it, over the bridge of your nose down to your chin? And are you properly going from ear to ear when you are removing it or putting it back on? The thing is if you're not doing any of that and you're just taking it on and off and you're wearing it as a chin girdle or wearing it right beneath your nose, of course, when it comes down to testing if masks are effective against COVID or anything else, it's going to come up that they're not effective if we're not even testing if people are wearing them correctly. And it's crazy because I've been actually sitting on a publication, which I need to go ahead and get out there, of where literally I did observations in an emergency department of just people that were wearing their masks correctly and were practicing hand hygiene when interacting with the environment. And you would be surprised how many people will touch the rails of the chair. They done went to the vending machine. They done lowered their mask with their hands after touching the vending machine, and now they're sitting there eating their potato chips, and then they put their mask right back up, and they might not eat, and they putting it on and touching it from the front of the mask where all of the droplets have failed.
If the CDC, if nurses are calling for public meetings, what do they hope to achieve by having these public meetings? Because now we're still not hearing what you said. We're not being told how to wear the masks, how to put them on, how to remove them, how to handle them. Everybody I know, like you said, is still, not everybody, so many people still wearing chin girdles. People don't use a clamp on the mask to clamp the mask around their noses. They just put it on their faces, but they're not being told. I can't condemn anybody. That's not my job anyway. But we're not being given the right information, Dr. Knighton. And you see it every day.
They want proper protection. And when I say proper protection, that means that if I am inside of a healthcare facility and I'm taking care of a patient, I want to know that anything that I'm doing is going to protect me while caring for that patient. N95 masks provided nurses with that level of protection, especially if they were being properly fit tested. doing away with them and saying to wear a surgical mask does not provide someone much comfort. For one of the main concerns is that the mask gap on the side. So an N95 mask is sealed. So at least, I'm not saying it might have the full seal, but you have more of a proper seal around the nose area and around the mouth than what it is that you would have if you were having a surgical mask on. Surgical masks don't come in size small, large, and all of the different variations of sizes. It's one standard size. So whenever I put one on, I have to literally double loop it around the ears just to make sure that I'm getting a better seal. And so I'm saying that to say they feel like their safety is on the line right now.
Well, isn't it?
By not having access to it and someone telling them like, hey, just wear a surgical mask on the units and that'll work.
But, I mean, well, isn't there safety on the line right now? Because they're being told, look, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can wear an N95 mask here. You don't have to wear it there. Maybe the patients have to wear them. Maybe they don't. I mean, it seems like we're back to where we started. Dr. Knighton, we're getting inconsistent information. And so I don't feel as safe as I need to feel. And so a lot of people are over it. They're like, what are you guys doing? It's like nothing was learned, Dr. Knighton.
And I agree with that. And I'm not going to disagree, and I'm not speaking against or speaking for any particular organization. But I can understand people's frustration when there is a lack of clarity around guidelines that don't seem easy to follow. But I do tell people that when these guidelines come out, they're specific for facilities. Meaning, for example, I've been inside of some hospitals recently where they were like, hey, the COVID numbers are up, so we're going to implement masks for the next 2 weeks to be able to lower the risk of transmission. And so in those particular instances, as I'm still going to continue to mention, people have to wear them correctly.
But no one's telling you how. Even when you walk into the hospitals, you just have a station from which they dispense the masks, and people just put them on, and they keep on going. They might put them under the nose, might put them above their nose. They certainly don't clamp that little, the little metal object on these little masks. No one is talking about securing it on the nose. They just put it on and then they're like, okay, I'm protected, but it's not true. If a mask is improperly worn, are you being protected adequately?
No, you're not. You are not being adequately protected. And in fact, mask can become an impetus for germs, meaning you could actually put yourself more at risk wearing a mask incorrectly than not wearing a mask at all. Because what then is meant to protect you then becomes, it's like almost having a weapon. Because if you're then call yourself using that mask, but you're steadily touching items in the environment and then touching the mask, you're moving those germs directly to your face.
Who's going to say something about that?
Santita, I'm going to keep saying something about it because I understand how important it is where people want to say masks don't work. I'm always going to continue to say, were you wearing it properly? Did you practice hand hygiene before and after? Did you make sure that you follow directions on the box? Which is a real thing, Santita. It actually says on there that you should not be exposing your mask to the sun. So for people that like to wear their mask outside, you are lowering the effectiveness of the mask by wearing it outside because it says that it actually breaks down the materials of a surgical mask by being exposed to sunlight.
So should you not wear the mask outside? So when you go outside,
you should not be wearing. Nope. Some boxes say that you should not wear the mask outside, and so I would encourage everyone that yes, I do understand what you're saying in regards to masks being inside of a dispensary, but I would say go get a box of masks, and I would be following that rule of thumb because some protection is better than no protection. I would be following that rule of thumb for all masks. Meaning that if it says change my mask out every 4 hours, if it says do not wear it in the sun, I'm not wearing it in the sun, and I'm making sure I'm changing it out every 4 hours just to be safe.
What if you get the mask most people get masks, in a public place. It's like it's like going to the restroom and getting tissue. You just pull the mask and you keep
Mhm.
on going. They don't have any instructions.
Right. So I would assume in that particular instance, how I'm recommending the changing it out every 4 hours. For one, making sure that something is there to clean your hands before
You have a
get
caller.
mask out. And this is just something that I do when I do get masked in public places or in healthcare facilities. I clean my hands, okay, and I always discard the first mask. Then I clean my hands again, and then I get the one that wasn't exposed at the bottom.
Hold on. Let me bring on John because he just very quickly, John, you said you got COVID and you've been wearing a mask. John, I've got about a couple of minutes, but I'm going to let you speak with the doctor during the break. But ask your question, John.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a strong proponent of masking. I've been wearing it nonstop for probably 3 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? A week and a half ago, my girlfriend got sick at work. She's a pharmacy technician, and she was wearing a mask. Long story short, she had the home test. She tested positive for COVID, and I dropped my guard, Santita. I dropped my guard because when you're close to somebody, you drop your guard. Even though I masked, I went in her house. I had her in my vehicle, and sure enough, I got it. So we both got COVID. We were both fully vaccinated and double boosted. And it's been and today's my 10th day after I contracted it. But just to let you know, this Omicron is extremely contagious. And man, it was the worst cold I ever had. But I thank God I did have the shots because it could have been a lot worse. So anyway, that's where I stand right now.
No, stay right there because look, it seems that COVID behaves differently also with different people. I mean, different people, have different experiences with it, right? And which is part of the mystery of all of this too, John. Because I think that even as you have been vaccinated and boosted, what Dr. Knighton has also told us is that there are other things, not just being vigilant, like, you were like, hey, I dropped my guard with my girlfriend. Of course, I get that. But, you also have to make sure that your baseline health is strong, right, Dr. Knighton? I've got 1 minute.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm happy that you all are recovering well, John, in that regard. And so you are right, in regards to yes, if the protocol is not up to par around the board, in regards to let's say becoming lax, then it's very well possible. And we're all vulnerable within our homes when that happens, especially, when we have public facing professions.
Hey, are you doing okay, John, and your girlfriend?
I am. Yeah, we're doing fine. We're almost fully recovered, and but I tell you, it was a rough ride at Santita.
Oh, wow. Did you take a home test or did you go to the hospital?
She took a home test, and she had that Paxlovid,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of really helped her. I did not take it.
You just kind of
grinded
it out. Being a man,
yes,
I got it. Being that guy. I'm gonna grind it out. He's gonna grind it out. John.
Thank you, Santita.
Sweetie, I'm glad you're doing okay, all right? But you know what? Get these masks and follow the instructions, okay, John?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Bye.
Sending you much love. Dr. Knighton, we love you. Hey, Dr. Nina. Let's talk about what's happening with the police. You're getting prevented from they're preventing the press from covering the crimes and from covering what the police are doing. John Nichols in the next hour too on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Dr. Knighton.
Yeah.
Bless his heart. I'm glad that he's doing all right. I was just having a little fun with him, but gee whiz, this is a lot.
I know, and sad part about it is people don't know what they don't know, and that's why prevention is so important. To constantly have that conversation with people because it's like, oh well, I did this. I constantly hear, well, I wore my mask, but if I start going through with people like they day to day, and I say, okay, how many times were you out in public? How many times did you clean your hands? Did you clean your hands before touching your mask? Where did you sit your mask down at while you were eating? How did you remove it? If I ask people how did they remove their mask, I can tell you that literally about 75% of them tell me that they don't remove it from ear to ear. And they don't, it's either that's missing or they don't practice hand hygiene before and after.
But the person who told us to do that was you. Nobody else is saying that.
Because it's being minimized. And that's why I say I'm never going to take away from the emphasis that's placed on vaccines. But my argument is going to continue to be give infection prevention and control that same energy that y'all give these drugs. And we will actually get somewhere. The other thing that I'm always going to express is that we have to remember that before there was any vaccines or any treatments available, this like hand hygiene, distancing, masking, screening, these were the mechanisms that actually kept people safe. And
Attorney Jones and Reverend Geary are on.
Times. But it's something that continues to be ignored and continues to be minimized. Imagine if there were campaigns on TV about proper hand hygiene, about the fact like, hey, share events in public, but don't share germs, reminding people how to clean their hands. Imagine if something was up there like, hey, clean your hands after you share the spoons at the buffet.
Oh.
Think about it. Everybody's hands is touching all of those spoons when you go to the buffet. You sit down and you start eating your corn and you don't even clean your hands right in between.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, these are common things that's not thought about, but it's a real thing. When you at sporting events, you didn't just went to go get your popcorn. You sat back down in your seat. There's no hand sanitizer on the rails anywhere, but you don't have any in your purse either. So you just touched all of the rails and stuff to get back to your seat, and now you're getting ready to eat your popcorn and you don't have anything to clean your hands with.
Reverend Dr. Geary and Attorney Daryl Jones, this is why we need to have Dr. Knighton and infection preventionists, but particularly Dr. Knighton on these discussions, because we don't know how to use masks. We don't know what to do out here. And now in the previous segment, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Knighton, as we talked about the fact that now the National Nurses United, the largest nurses union in the United States, they are taking on the CDC because the CDC is now given yet again some contradictory instructions on masks. Well, N95 is equal to other masks, and that's not true. But Dr. Knighton is also telling us if these masks are not properly fitted, they're not giving you the adequate protection. So there's just, and if you have certain allergies, there some vaccines you shouldn't be taking, and on and on and on and on. We're not being given the information, Reverend Dr. Geary, and that for me and Attorney Jones, that is what is so, it's upsetting and it's unsettling that you have something that has just really reshaped our lives. And we still are not, there's still no consensus that is being followed and that is being propagated about masks, about wearing them, about which ones are the safest, about how to wear them, which ones are the safest, and on and on. None of that's you're not being told any of that. Reverend Dr. Geary, what are we supposed to do with that? I've got about a minute before we come up.
Well, good morning, Santita, to Dr. Knighton. I was linked in just as Doc was getting to the part about you've been to the buffet and you sat down and started eating your corn. I think I was like, okay. I feel like I showed up in the middle of the movie and I missed the setup, but okay. Inside, it's not new that inside our communities, we've always needed our own truth tellers who we look to give us the information while there are broader debates about what folks should and should not do. And I think Dr. Knighton, she is the guru for us, not just us, but for everybody who would choose to listen. But we've got to count on her to be able to tell us the truth so that we're not sitting there. I'd never even thought about the fact I'd have been through this buffet line and how many different serving utensils had I touched after so many people, because I'm speaking to people and talking to people. I'm thinking we having a good old time. Honey, I'm getting ready to go. I'm on Amazon now. Send me some sanitizer.
Listen, and even networking events, you know what drives me nuts with networking events is because they miss the network. But people sitting there eating their hand foods and they shaking hands. And they never think about the fact that they're putting stuff in their mouth while they're shaking hands.
Lord,
it's like it's the best place to pick up germs.
Wait a minute, you got the pastor saying, Lord Jesus. Oh, it's like he's thinking
Look,
about
it's
all
like the
these
bump
hands he's been
elbows and give
shaking.
it.
Girl, he's been shaking
Yeah.
hands, hugging folks, and
Bump elbows
not giving
or
no.
give a good prayer.
These they ain't gonna take that at
1 minute.
Douglas. And just think about where all those hands have been, Reverend Doctor, Esquire.
Or look, you know what we say? We say, touch your neighbor. Look, now I'm gonna be like, don't touch me. You touch me.
Wait a minute, not my neighbor, but me. Leave me alone. You want to hug him if you want to. He is awful. Oh man, this is like awful. I mean, when you see the praise team for church
30
now,
seconds.
it's like no, they've got about 20 seconds. No choirs. Everybody's standing 20 feet apart, but at least they get the best singers. But part of the great thing of about our choir tradition is that you had people sometimes who couldn't sing at all. It was a group experience, but that's over. There's just a lot going on, y'all. But you need to know.
It is.
You know
10
what?
seconds.
I got 10 seconds. We're going to be talking about these masks every day. That won't
Stand
be the
by.
only thing, but if you can just give a quick blurb on that, that would be important. Stand by, everybody.
Yes.
Stand by.
Can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about police. Police are seeking radio silence to mute critics in the press. They are blocking members of the press from listening in on their calls, so they can't get to the call to investigate what happened at the crime scene or to even observe police behavior. It's happening all over the country. We got to talk about that because it's happening increasingly everywhere. So, oh boy, what happens? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, what if we did not have that video of Freddie Gray of George Floyd? Now, mind you, those were shot by people who just happened to be there. But you have a lot of members of the press who have police scanners, which you can buy on Amazon, just like that. And so they track the story so they can go on and file a story. And in many of these photographers, so they can get paid for the photograph. Well, they're being blocked from that. So let's talk about that here on the Santita Jackson Show. And then what's happening in Wisconsin. These Republicans promised that you can elect all the Democrats you want, but we're going to roll back on them. That's what's happening right now. You can't make this stuff up, everybody. Let's get some of these headlines so we can get to the rest of the show. Congress has less than 5 days to prevent a government shutdown. Lawmakers return to Washington with no deal in sight ahead of Saturday's deadline to find an agreement to fund the government. President Biden will meet striking auto workers in Michigan today. Not only will he meet them, he's going to march with them, everybody, to show support for these workers picketing the big three automakers, Stellantis, GM, and Ford. Former President Trump will skip a Republican primary debate to deliver a speech in Michigan. The UAW has not endorsed either of these candidates. And did you see that he was admiring a gun yesterday, and the information was put out that he purchased a gun, but as someone who's under federal indictment, federal law prohibits him from purchasing a gun. It's important for you to note, everybody. Senator Bob Menendez brushed off calls for him to resign. The powerful New Jersey Democrat, the former head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said, look, I'm going to stay in office and I'm going to let the wheels of justice grind on. Last week, a federal indictment alleged that he and his wife accepted bribes in exchange for exerting his political influence, everybody. And David McCallum, the man from U.N.C.L.E., the Scottish actor who was also on NCIS, made his transition yesterday. He was 90 years of age. Unbelievable. Died yesterday in New York, surrounded by family. May he rest in peace. Thank you for that beautiful body of work that you have given us. Chicago, a high of 70 degrees, thunderstorms. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 65 degrees and showers. In the NFL last night, Monday Night Football, the Bengals 19, the Rams 16. Major League Baseball, the A's will be playing the Twins. The Cubs will be in Atlanta, and the White Sox will be playing the Diamondbacks, everybody, in the WNBA playoffs tonight. Two great games, Sun versus Liberty, and the Wings versus the Aces. Everybody, I tell you what, even though things are tight economically, you can still own a home. And you can also build or rebuild your credit. You need to reach out to Team Hochberg to make that happen. If you have a credit score that's in the 500s or even the 600s, and you want to build your credit, you want to rebuild your credit, you want to build some credit, they have a credit card that's attached to a credit union that will enable you to build, rebuild, fix your credit. Please call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and get you a credit card, not the debit card. The debit card does not help you to establish credit. It does nothing but pull money out of your account. You need a credit card. Say you've been turned down for credit cards. This is your opportunity to, within a year, get a credit card. Don't go crazy, but to get a credit card. But you must first build, rebuild, or establish credit. And Team Hochberg can help you to do that. But they can also help you to buy a home. If you have not owned a home in the past 3 years, or now 4 years ago, you might have owned one, but maybe not in the past 3 years. And if you are living in Chicago and your total income in your home, everybody in your home, the heads of your household make under $105,700 a year, you just might be able to get a home, everybody. Now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have come up with a program where they've lowered their mortgage rates. The program could change at any time. They could raise these rates, but they really want Americans to own homes because first-time buyers continue to decline in the marketplace. That is not good for America. So what they're saying is, look, if you've not owned a home in the past 3 years, if you make less than $105,700, that is your total household income, then we might be able to help you. So go to 56david.com, 56david.com, or call them at 855-56-DAVID and talk to them. And you might also be having some trouble making your mortgage payment, or somebody might have lost a job. Somebody's job might have been cut. You might be one of these UAW workers who's making $500 a week while you're on strike. Well, call David Hochberg and his team so that you can talk to them and get some advocates who can help you to continue to pay your mortgage, or someone who can negotiate with your mortgage, with your mortgage lender so that you can hold on to your home. You need an advocate, everybody. That much is clear. And Team Hochberg, those are your people. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and let's hold on to our homes and let's get some homes, everybody. The cornerstone of American wealth. Everybody, police are seeking radio silence that would mute critics in the press. Now, there's a freelance journalist. I was reading this article in Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary from Rainbow Push and the senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church, brilliant civil rights lawyer and chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Darrell Jones. He said, I'm a photographer from the New York Daily News. I've got my police scanner. I'm hearing about, this particular incident. So I speed over there. And he got there. He was trying to catch some crime footage because many of these photographers, they're paid by the photo, or they're certainly paid by the story. Well, guess what? They're being blocked. Today, the right to listen to police radio in real time is under attack in Baltimore, in California, all over in New York. It's happening all over the country. Members of the press are not allowed to cover crime scenes, and therefore they're not allowed to cover police behavior. Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, why don't you kick things off? Because this is a real deal. I mean, because now these members of the press are asking city councils to intervene and to preserve press freedom. What's going on here? What's happening with the police?
Well, that's the question. If you ask them, first, good morning to you. I'm still I'm getting out the buffet line. Anyway.
Hands off the utensils. Okay.
Hands off the utensils. So the argument from the police side is that not having encrypted radio transmissions allows folks that they're trying to apprehend to hear what they're doing in real time. Now, I don't know too many, I don't know who's running around with scanners kind of listening to those transmissions, but that's kind of the argument. So in Baltimore, the proposal has been, and I think they've even kind of implemented it, that there's a 15-minute delay on the transmissions to allow for the officers to kind of respond. The spidey sense in me that goes up is that in Baltimore City, we've had issues with a lot of corruption. We've had the gun trace task force. We've had the issues that are now part of our consent decree in terms of the constitutional violations of folks' rights in the city. And so there's this caution, this hazard that folks are saying, wait a minute, you want to encrypt the ability to monitor you, but we've already seen that you cannot monitor yourself. And so if we don't have the ability to listen, to respond in real time, if the press doesn't have the opportunity to hear what's going on and the public at large, then what you do is you really create an environment where the bacteria of constitutional violations begins to grow like it's a petri dish, because you got a 15-minute buffer to do whatever it is that you're going to do. And so without the proper checks and balances, you really have an issue. I get it, the officer safety argument. I'm not sure how much weight that carries. But the bigger caution for me is what can go wrong in 15 minutes of a delay if officers
You have a caller.
that the only folks who can hear what they're talking about is them. We've got cases now in the suburbs of Chicago where we're listening to police transmissions after the fact, trying to understand what were they hearing in real time. If we're not able to hear it as it's happening, then now we have to kind of reconstruct what may have been going on at a particular time after something bad has happened. And that's a bad mix. If we're trying to get to a better sense of police-community relations and better public safety, this is not a policy that they want to take hold in the law enforcement space, because I think it could do much greater harm than any good that they think might come of it.
It's not a good thing. Before we get to the callers, Attorney Daryl Jones, you observed the Ahmaud Arbery case in real time. And people power was really prominent in the midst of that case, right? And people power really is the power that we may or may not use is really a feature in all of these cases. But press freedom is important too, because we need them. They're supposed to be objective and all of that, but for them to be blocked from a crime scene or from something that has happened. What does that say to you?
Well, Santita, good morning, and certainly my brother, Reverend Todd Yeary, good morning to you as well. And he's laid it out really well with regards to what I think it all indicates. And I tell you, when you start blocking the public from information that the public is paying to have access to, the equipment that these officers are using are paid for by public dollars. Everything, the car that they're in, the uniform that they're wearing, all of that is paid for by public dollars. So the public has the right to know what's going on. And, I understand, and I've been on those county councils where the information is, you want to protect the police. Well, by the same token, you need to protect the public. And sometimes the public is best protected by having access to information as it's happening real time. Not after there's time to dilute anything, not after it's time to play with any of the messaging that goes out. Because let's be clear, when you start having this 15-minute delay, 15 will become 30 minutes, will become a day. It will become whatever they decide they want to do. So it's a dangerous path to start down. And where do you stop? Do you then go to the body-worn cameras? Where do you stop? No. The answer is we are paying, the public is paying for them to have access to the information. The public is paying for them to have the vehicles. The public should have a live time access to what is happening. And I can tell you that, I've been practicing criminal defense for a long time and was a prosecutor prior to that. And I am yet to see the case where someone says that I was following along on the police scanner about what was happening, so I knew what to do. It's the extremely, extremely rare case that's a poor excuse. I've never heard about it interfering with the actions of a police officer. Never. So I don't buy that that stuff that they're rolling out there. What I do buy is that they want to be able to keep undercover what they're doing so that the union can protect them even more greatly. That's what I hear. And the public has got to say no and say, no, you continue to show us everything that's going on in real time. And I've heard more cases where columnists, artists, people that are following are assisting the police based on the information that they're hearing, are saying, he's over in this area, he's hiding over here. I've heard that more often than I've heard that the bad people, the accusers, the accused, is using it for some other type of purpose to get away from the police, Santita.
You know, I think, Attorney Jones, when the police continue to exert this kind of power, when the state exerts this kind of power, I think that we should all be very, very concerned. You know, that's to me, that's very, very dangerous. Shapiro, hey, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Santita. Let me tell you, I experienced this in my son's case, and I was actually astounded. One of the things when I was able to receive the 911 report and listen to the call, I was taken aback because the police officer told the 911 dispatcher, I'm going to call you directly. To me, that sounded suspect because of the fact that here you are in an emergency situation. These are supposed to be recorded calls. So whatever they were doing to my son at that time, they got off the phone and he called the dispatcher directly.
Hold that thought. Wait. Hold on. It's like shadows of Ahmaud Arbery when the former police officer was able to call the prosecutor, Attorney Jones, and then the prosecutor said, "Hey, clean yourself up. We're gonna work this out." And is that an oversimplification?
No, that's a perfect parallel. I mean, that's precisely what happened.
Oh, Shapiro, please continue.
I was saying, Santita, this has been occurring for a long time. They're basically trying to circumvent the system and also circumvent the consent decree that they do not want implemented fully. And so these tactics that they're trying to put in place today are to try to protect them and not protect the public. We shouldn't need a consent decree, but we need it because of the patterns and practices of the police department. So we need more oversight, not less. And so my thing is that, people have been seriously hurt, injured, and killed by police, and this continues. Even though you don't see it more, very prevalent on the news media every day, it is still happening in these streets. And we hear the cries of mothers all the time because they're not getting highlighted like Ahmaud Arbery, because they're not as egregious. And the things that are happening to Black and brown people are often, slight. And but they're all systems of police brutality. And we need all the oversight that we can get, Santita. We do not need them to roll back anything.
But let me say this. Just interrupt, Shapiro. Ahmaud Arbery's case would have gone into rock and roll heaven too. Now, wait. That didn't just. I mean, the media didn't go away and blow this up. It was his family that did that, which is what you've been doing with your son's case. I mean, because the fact is, we still don't know who did what to your son. I mean, it does not appear to have been the police, right? No, I just want to establish something. Because it doesn't appear to have been the police. So we still don't know what happened between the time he was with his girlfriend, right? Because you've been calling us about this case for 3 years. The last person to speak to your son when he was living was who?
His girlfriend. He was telling her that he was outside of her apartment. And the thing is, Santita, what I tell people when people ask me, are the police exempt? I said, I can't tell you who shot my son. What I can tell you is that when he was in front of the police, they did nothing to save his life. And everything they did actually, basically prevented him from living and surviving, because I believe his gunshot and the medical record shows that his gunshot wounds were survivable. And so my thing is that what I'm seeing, Santita, and I have been fighting for 2.5 years to get the full Inspector General report that Brandon Johnson has said he will release to me. I want to know what happened when he was with the police.
Well, hold on.
I want to know that.
Well, hold on. Because generally speaking, like you said, you sadly are part of a number. You're part of a number, because it's not just the police, because the police also need to start pursuing what happened in that neighborhood between his girlfriend and what happened, because we want to know what happened. I mean, and you're a former prosecutor, Daryl Jones. I certainly think we need to look at what the police should have done, could have done, what they were supposed to have done, even though now those rules have been flipped, so they don't have to do a lot of things. But you need to know what happened. But if the media are prevented from finding out about what happened, if they're told, well, wait a minute, I'll call you privately, or the prosecutor says, well, you know what you need to do is go wash your hands, change your clothes. If the media are prevented from that, because that was what you all found out with the Ahmaud Arbery case, and I wish you and Barbara Arnwine could be everywhere at all times. Talk to me, Daryl. If the media are prevented from looking at these cases in real time, I think it endangers all of us. I'll have a minute for you, and then a minute for Reverend Dr. Todd Erie Esquire.
No, Santita, you're right. You're right on the mark. If the media is prevented from going through to listen and to follow in real time what's happening, then what happens is that the system of it's almost like a check and balances, right? The media has the ability to listen to what the police are saying, see what the reactions are, and see what the reality is, and to be on the scene. If any of that is interrupted, then it's then there's a darkness that exists, a cloaking of darkness, a cloud of darkness that's there where we won't know exactly what happened. The media are our eyes and our ears at that moment, and we need to protect that.
Reverend Dr. Erie, last minute belongs to you.
This is one of those instances where organizations that have proven the inability to comply and conform with expectations of lawful enforcement, not law enforcement, lawful enforcement. You do not limit the ability of public monitoring, to Daryl's point about public dollars. That ain't your radio frequency. That's mine. My taxes pay for it. Our dollars pay for it. We should be able to listen to it whenever we get ready. And they always have back channels if they're really trying to communicate off the grid to be able to have whatever enforcement conversations they need to have. So this is a smokescreen. It's some foolishness, and we should fight it with everything that we have in it.
Everybody, we are being blocked from the information. It's something that ought to be concerning to you. Everybody needs oversight. That's the fight with the Supreme Court right now. Everybody needs to be checked. There needs to be balance. Unchecked power leads to tyranny. Don't ever let that happen. The police work for us. I want the police to have my back. I don't want them on my back. And I want them to be protected too. But we have to have a mutually trusting relationship. Let's talk about what's happening in Wisconsin, everybody. That's a big, big deal. The Republicans said they were going to start going after these Democrats, Attorney Jones and Reverend Dr. Erie, and they're doing it, including the Supreme Court justice who just won decisively in Wisconsin. You can't make this up. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. Chaparral, are you still there?
I am, Santita.
Okay, you want to say something before we move to the next topic?
Like I said, I just think that we have to definitely be on them to make sure that we have these protections, because it's going to be a dangerous society if we do not. It's very concerning for me to see that we go 5 steps forward and they try to take us 10 steps back. And you know, it's out here. And, you know, I'm glad the information that you're putting the information out here so we can have our antennas up. So when it comes down that they may vote something in, we can actually see what's happening and be out there in full force. Because, you know, we fought for these police cameras and these dash cams.
Oh, Chaparral?
So Pearl dropped.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, do we have John Nichols?
Yes, he's on.
Okay, John
You do?
Nichols. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
I can just step back away.
I'm well, my friend.
My dear friend, I can step back from the mic so you can tell me what's happening in Wisconsin. Is Reverend Dr. Uri still there?
Conversation.
Or Attorney Jones?
I'm still here too.
Still here.
Well, you know, because, you know, it's like talk about getting your popcorn. These were David Daly told us in his book Rat Effed, that these people had a plan, John Nichols. The night of the Barack Obama election, they said, okay, you can have the presidency. What we're going to do is take everything else in America, from the local, from the rooter to the tutor. Take that ceremonial, I'm done with that. But I'm going to control both houses of Congress. How can I do that? If I control the state houses. And if I control the state houses, then you know what? I'm going to control county boards. I'm going to control localities. And they have systematically been doing that. That's why I went to Ballotpedia, y'all, and told you, and they keep telling you that Trump did horribly in 2022. The corporate media are not telling you the truth. He won nearly 90% of his races. 90%. When you talk about the hold he had, he doesn't have a hold on the Republican Party. He has recreated the Republican Party. He brought people to the Republican Party, just as Bernie Sanders recreated the Democratic Party, just as Reverend Jesse Jackson did. It's a different deal. So you all need to understand the game that they're playing. When they say, oh, in 2022, John, that, you know, he did horribly. That's a lie. He did beautifully. He won. And now the Republicans, as we're seeing in Wisconsin, they are like, oh, you won? The Supreme Court? Oh, okay. Let me tell you what we're going to do. You got to sit back and tell us the story. Do you have your popcorn, Todd?
I'll do my best.
Todd?
I always have my popcorn. I'm right here. Here we go.
Now, Todd is part of the national leadership team at Rainbow Push, but he's also
1 minute.
one of the past. Thank you so much, sweetie. He's also part of. He is the senior pastor of one of the iconic Black churches in the United States, Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, and of course, the chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Darrell Jones. We were just talking about the police and how they are now limiting press access to their police scanners, so people can't get to you know.
Well, Daryl knows these issues well.
30 seconds.
And so does Reverend Uri. I mean, these issues that we'll talk about in a moment are issues that connect to everything else, right? You know, when we talk about policing, when we talk about everything else, why don't we get the progress that we know we need? Well, one of the answers is that the electoral processes are so frequently rigged against us.
10 seconds.
Literally rigged against us. And in that case, even when we do all the work, even when
stand by
the answers,
we don't
necessarily win.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, you know what time it is. It is Tuesday, 7:30. You know, at the bottom of the hour, we always talk with John Nichols, New York Times best-selling author of It's Okay to Be Mad About Capitalism. He and Bernie Sanders wrote that book, and boy, everybody's been getting it. So let's talk about what is wrong with what's happening to the Republic right now. the democratic aspects of it. Something is happening. We've had a member of the Santita Jackson Show family, of course, is David Daley. He's had a New York Times bestseller on his hands too, Rat Aft, The True Story of the Secret Plan to Steal Our Democracy. Well, the night that that Barack Obama won, the GOP, the top thinkers in the party said, you know what, look, they can have the presidency. You got it. But what we're going to do is seize control of local, county, state governments. State governments will then lead us to control both houses of Congress. And now we're watching it. They said, you know what? And when Democrats elect Democrats, we're going to take you out. And everyone was celebrating months ago when you got this progressive Supreme Court justice. Fair, but she said, look, these are my thoughts. I'm not going to act like the Supreme Court justices on the U.S. Supreme Court and tell you a lie about where I stand on these issues. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be honest with you. Well, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. It seems that after she won decisively, the Republicans are trying to take her out. What is going on in Wisconsin? You have a land of cheese and all this wholesomeness, Apple's way. What y'all doing up there?
Yeah. Well, I think the important thing to do at the start is to recognize that Wisconsin's not so different, right? Same things are happening in altered forms, but with the precise same goal. In Ohio, in North Carolina, what we're seeing is a takeover of the courts in order to achieve goals that Republicans cannot achieve at the ballot box. And so the interesting thing is that to give you an example of another state and circle back into Wisconsin, in Ohio, a year or so ago, the state Supreme Court made a ruling that you have to have fair districts, right? It was supportive of the idea of changing the maps so that people could actually participate in elections for the state legislature where their will, the will of the people, would be reflected to get rid of gerrymandering. And what did the Republicans do? They poured resources into taking over the state Supreme Court. So now the court is reversing that progress. What happened in North Carolina? In North Carolina, the state Supreme Court was, until very recently, supportive of the idea of fair elections and fair maps. Not perfect, but usually often ruling in the right way. Now Republicans have engineered a takeover of the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, and it looks like they're about to get horrible maps, which even though North Carolina is a roughly evenly divided state, you're likely to get elections that favor Republicans overwhelmingly. Well, in Wisconsin, Wisconsin gets a lot of attention, but it's important to point out this is part of a national plan. But in Wisconsin, what happened was, 12, 13 years ago, Republicans came to power, legitimately winning an election. It was a good year in 2010 for Republicans. They came to power. They had the governorship and the state legislature. They immediately redrew the maps of legislative districts to overwhelmingly favor Republicans. What that did was create a situation that was absurd. Democrats would win statewide. Barack Obama easily won Wisconsin in 2012. Tammy Baldwin easily won for the Senate in 2012. And yet that year, Republicans took control of both houses of the state legislature by overwhelming margins. And here's the twist, Santita. In that election and elections afterward, you'd have overwhelmingly more people vote for Democrats for state legislative seats. Like 200,000 more people would vote for the Democrats for the state house, and yet Republicans would end up with almost a two-thirds majority because of the way the maps were drawn. What they had done is they had put all the Democrats into overwhelmingly Democratic districts, and then they had created Republican districts which they could always win, but that were a little bit more, that weren't as packed in. And so they basically took all the power out of the Democratic vote by concentrating in places where ultimately it would have little meaning as regards the overall makeup of the chamber. So they did that, and they lived off that for a number of years. When redistricting came after the 2020 census, they still engineered a situation because of conservative control of the state Supreme Court, where they got maps that allowed Republicans to win even when they didn't get big margins or do well. In 2022, Democrats won the governorship. They won all sorts of statewide offices, yet Republicans maintained this overwhelming control of the legislature. 2023, this year, as you and I have talked about a lot on this show, Democrats, liberals, progressives, some people who weren't Democrats, some moderate Republicans, supported a candidate for the state Supreme Court who said that if she was elected, she would support fair maps. She would make sure that the maps weren't biased, that they weren't rigged. And she got elected. She didn't get elected by a little. She got elected by a lot, by over 200,000 votes. With a 55-45 margin. She carried urban, rural, and suburban counties. It was a very successful campaign, and everyone knew with Justice Janet Protasiewicz that they were electing someone who was determined to support fair elections, which, by the way, it ought to be the goal of someone who swears an oath to the Constitution of the state and the country. Now, as she has taken her place on the court, Republicans are talking about impeaching her. What is their reason for impeaching her? Not because of anything she's done on the court, not because she's corrupt, not because she's dishonest. In fact, they want to impeach her because she's honest. They want to impeach her because she said during the campaign she thought the maps were rigged. And they said, well, that's unfair. She's biased. Well, her bias is toward the truth. Her bias is toward reality. And they are talking about impeaching her. At the same time, they are already in the process of impeaching the head of the state elections commission, who is not a Democrat, not somebody who's biased, but somebody who has been supportive of fair elections. Why are they doing all this? What's going on in Wisconsin? The answer is they're looking at the pattern of elections in Wisconsin. Since 2016, Trump narrowly won Wisconsin, but since 2016, Democrats have won the governorship twice. They've reelected Tammy Baldwin to the Senate. They've elected Democrats to all sorts of statewide offices, attorney general, secretary of state, state treasurer over the years. They have also won 3 consecutive state Supreme Court elections, and not by a little, but by a lot, overwhelming victories that have given them statewide, given them control of the court. Progressives, not Democrats. It's a nonpartisan court, technically. But they have won and won and won. And the Republicans are looking at this and they're saying, oh my goodness, if we don't rig the maps, if we don't cheat, we're not going to win anymore. We're going to lose our positions. We're going to lose our sinecures. And so suddenly they're talking about impeaching a legitimately elected state Supreme Court justice. They're already trying to impeach the head of the elections board. And, you're seeing how this game plays. It is not democracy. This is an effort to make sure that democracy doesn't work. And as you said at the start, they are not powerless in this regard. They have immense amounts of money. They have immense amounts of political connections. And also they do have the support of many of their people because, unfortunately, maybe we didn't teach civics very well, but there are an awful lot of people who seem to have given up on democracy and believe that win at any cost is the motto for not just Wisconsin, but states across the country.
We're talking with John Nichols about what's happening in Wisconsin, but it's happening in Ohio, it's happening in North Carolina, it's happening all over the country. And what's amazing, John Nichols, is that, and we still have Attorney Darrell Jones and Reverend Dr. Todd Geary Esquire listening in. They said the quiet part out loud. They said they were going to do this. Yeah. What is mystifying to me is that there was no counter. I mean, just it has to be an aggressive and loud counter by the Democrats, just to say, look, we know what you're doing. You said you were going to do it, and you know what? You failed to plan. You planned to fail. You did not plan to fail, and this is what you've been doing. You got to say that out loud, John, because this is very dangerous. Because with these Republican-led legislatures, they can impeach and remove these elected officials, can they not?
Well, the state constitution gives us the power, and it's a vague constitution written in the times when naively, I think a lot of people thought, well, nobody would abuse this power. It was foolish because, of course, now we do have the abuse of the power. And this is a problem with constitutions. They're often written in very noble, very vague terms, which leave a lot of space for abuse. And in Wisconsin, we're now seeing that abuse. And you can't rewrite the Constitution instantaneously. So yes, they've got the avenues that allow them to do this, but also something else. And I think this is an important part of this discussion, Santita. We have seen the decay of local journalism across this country. More than 2,000 newspapers have closed in recent years. Tens of thousands of people who used to be reporters are no longer reporters. Online media has never caught up with what you used to have when you had big newsrooms on broadcast and print covering communities. And so we've ended up in a situation where our media is very much diminished. It's not as strong as it was. And that has left a void. And that void is being filled, especially online, by propaganda, right? By sometimes fake news, but also, very, very biased stances on all these things. And so be careful not to blame the people. Often the people are going off the information they get. And the fact of the matter is the information people are getting now, more and more, coming not from their local communities, but nationally, is that, the other side is evil. The other side is dangerous. And so anything you do to prevent them from having power, even if it means voter suppression, even if it means denial of the right to vote, even if it means drawing unfair legislative district lines, even if it means allowing huge, big money, corporate money, billionaire money to flow into politics, whatever, as long as you win, it's okay. And that sensibility has infected our politics to such an extent because we don't have much counter to it, as regards, again, local media that used to exist, be it conservative or liberal media, it still tended to be at least somewhat responsible on some of these election issues. As we've seen this change, we've ended up in a situation where I think there is a decay of faith in democracy, not on everybody's part, but on the part of a lot of people. And so there aren't enough people who just say, this is wrong. You can't do this. And so far in the state legislature, one Republican, they have overwhelming majorities. So far, one Republican has stepped up publicly to say, I won't go along with this impeachment of the Supreme Court justice because she was fairly elected. One Republican has done that so far out of all, roughly about 100 legislators.
But the vitriol that, I hear the ugliness.
Oh, I know you do. I know you do.
But just in the whole political atmosphere, it's just.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think
it's. And it's also not just on one side.
No, that's what I'm
does
saying.
Exist.
But no, because you were about to say it does exist where?
It exists on all sides. And you see, the problem is, when you start to have politics become a winner-take-all game, right? And not a noble endeavor, but a winner-take-all game, and I underline that word game, even though the consequences are much higher than any game, you end up in a situation where people initially, maybe on one side, start to say, well, we're going to do whatever it takes to win. And then the people on the other side start to develop that attitude as well. And elections become no longer contests about ideas or about who might be the best official. They become contests that, have enormous consequences, i.e., we seek to win because we want to not just enact our policies or our agenda, but to do things that will shut down the other side, that will prevent the other side from raising its banner, from raising its issues, from being able to win. And that's what's happened with gerrymandering in Wisconsin. Wisconsin used to be a state that flipped back and forth, right? Democrats won, Republicans won. They had to appeal to the great mass of people. Since 2010, when they gerrymandered our legislature, in every even year election or odd year election, Republicans have won everything for the legislature. They've won total control. That's not normal. That's not possible unless you've rigged the maps. Yeah.
It's because I'm like,
and it has huge consequences for,
we outnumber them.
Yeah.
Democrats outnumber Republicans across the country, but we keep losing these races. You know what? If you don't mind, I'd like for Attorney Jones and Reverend Dr. Todd Deary to react to what you're saying, because of course, all roads are leading to Chicago next summer.
Well, can I say?
Sure.
Can I say one thing before you do that? It's important. Both Reverend Urie and Daryl Jones. I'm honored to be talking for a couple minutes here, but they've been at the heart and soul of these fights. These are not fights. They're not learning something here. They're in the thick of this as well. And I've stood, especially at Daryl Jones' side, as he has literally been in the forefront of seeking to challenge not maybe this particular issue, but these threats to voting rights. Transformative justice is rooted in fair elections and in democracy itself. So you bring them in because they are a part of this struggle at a fundamental level.
Attorney Jones?
Well, thank you for those words, and what John has laid out, particularly in Wisconsin, could not have been more accurate. I would begin by throwing out the question, and we always say this: right? What difference does a state trial court judge make? Right? What difference does my vote make for a state court trial judge? Well, this is what Judge Protasewitz's fight is all about there in Wisconsin right now, because what you see happening is this. It will ultimately be, in all likelihood, the state Supreme Court judge that not only makes a decision with regards to the maps, the redistricting maps that are being drawn because they're intent on bringing that back and challenging it completely, but there also is another underlying issue that's going on there. You have these Dobbs voters. You have the issue with the reproductive health of women. Okay, that's what was a big driving factor in that election. And it's not necessarily partisan when it comes to Dobbs, when it comes to reproductive health. And that's where the linchpin is for the strength of Judge Protasewicz, because they're not going to be – see, what they want to do is they want to get her out so they can get someone in there that will continue to make it illegal for women to be able to have access to abortions in Wisconsin. That's what they're after. That's the end game. Anything they can use to get to that point is what they want to throw out there. Any red meat to get the Republicans on board, to say we got to get rid of her because she took money from the Democratic Party. We got to get rid of her because she's threatening control of our legislative districts. But what you're not going to hear them say is we've got to get rid of her because of women's reproductive health, because they know that's a losing issue for them there in the state of Wisconsin. This is why it's so important that we be certain that we, protect the voters' rights, right? The voters have spoken in Wisconsin. This is who they selected. This is who they selected. How are you going to let people undo what the people have done? That's just wrong.
And that's why I'm saying the messaging, Attorney Jones and John Nichols, the messaging, it's right there. This is such low-hanging fruit, John Nichols.
Yep. But I want to put an exclamation mark before we bring Reverend Uri in. I want to put an exclamation mark on something Daryl Jones just said. He brought up the issue of reproductive rights, which is a huge issue in this election. Let me bring up one other issue, too. We're watching the UAW strike right now. UAW workers are on strike across this country. They're on strike in Wisconsin. They're on strike in Illinois, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
And this is an important thing to understand. Polling shows that strike has 75% support. People overwhelmingly support the union. And yet in the state of Wisconsin, unlike Illinois, in the state of Wisconsin, we've had over the last decade or so passed a pile of anti-union laws that make it almost impossible and very, very difficult to organize and to collectively bargain. And here's the interesting thing. During that Supreme Court race, Janet Protasewicz, the candidate who was elected overwhelmingly, said, we should also look at those laws and make sure that people's right to organize and the right to collectively bargain is protected, that not be blocked by unfair legislation. A very true statement, a very fair statement. That's one of the other things that these Republicans that are trying to impeach her are very afraid of, because they know if there's a Supreme Court that is in favor of reproductive rights, that is in favor of labor rights, that is in favor of democracy, not biasing things, but just saying, look, when we look at these cases, these are good things. Right to choose, right to organize a union, right to vote. They're afraid of the overall impact of a court that actually is about people's rights, that is about freedom, because they know that in that circumstance, suddenly people start to get empowered. And this is what they're most afraid of. They're most afraid of an electorate that is empowered to get what is the will of the people turned into the law of the land.
But John, that takes us back to what we were talking about, the previous discussion. I think they're all linked here. The power of the people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you have a press that is being diminished, that is being destroyed, quite frankly, particularly a local press. I mean, all these stories are local.
Oh, yeah.
Trayvon Martin's case was first a local case. Cop City is first a local case in Atlanta. When the police are cutting off the press access to their radio feed in real time.
Oh, yeah.
That's dangerous. And it's happening silently. I mean, the Chicago Sun-Times is basically a pamphlet now. I mean,
look at the Tribune. Even the Tribune, which used to hit, when the Tribune hit your doorstep, you were afraid that the cement was going to crack because it was so heavy. It was so big, right?
Right.
You know, now when it hits your doorstep, if there's a breeze, it may blow up.
You hear,
right?
Is that the paper? Yes.
Yeah.
That was terrible. But it's true. Just if you don't mind, 'cause I got a couple of minutes here, and Todd, if you can, Reverend Dr. Uri, if you can wait with us, because I want to get you all proper closing remarks. But I want John to speak to the people, because we're in the election season. See, that's to me the danger of the Democrats and the Democrats in this case cutting off the debate, because if you cut off the presidential debate, you cut off excitement about all of these other races. Because this presidential debate sparks the conversation about everything else. And now you got Robert Kennedy saying, you know what, y'all can have it. I might do third party. Like, you guys, do? Well, I mean, look, if you're not going to let him speak, come on. So,
you're hitting on an issue that I worry about a lot. This is a fundamental thing. One of the ways that you build your power for a November election is winning primaries. Going out there and campaigning for the nomination, right? And I'm afraid that the Democratic National Committee is, trying so hard to throw in with reelecting Joe Biden that they are actually not denying him, he's obviously sympathetic to some of these things, I suppose, but they're closing down avenues by which he could go out this winter and this spring and win that nomination. And they're not setting up the debates. They're not setting up the primaries and the caucuses in a way that really would give Biden a chance, or basically a requirement that he go out and do the job. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for either political party if you end up with a nominee who is ordained rather than genuinely nominated. And we know that from 1984 and 1988. There were barriers to the Reverend Jackson. And the fact is, when he took off as a candidate, it was hard for him to get to where he needed to go. Bernie Sanders saw the same thing in 2016. Look, these are lessons we should learn from. Don't make it easy to get the nomination. Make people have to work for it, because when they work for it and win it, they're more likely to get elected.
And you know what? And that's the end of the beginning of your job. Then you've got to protect the people who you elected, and then you got to push them too.
Yeah,
it's a democracy, y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a republic, and we have democratic aspects. If you want to really further the democracy, you got to get involved. Closing thoughts from this panel. I love you, everybody. And Alex, thank you for a great show. Everybody sending you much love. Go to WCPTA20.com/Santita so you can hear the show without any commercials. Everybody sending you much love. Sending you much love. Get the book. It's okay to be mad at capitalism. It's okay. It's a New York Times bestseller with John Nichols and Bernie Sanders, and it is great. It's okay. Now, don't stop at being mad. Do something about this. Make the system work for you and everybody around you. I love everybody. God bless. Well, John, closing thoughts, because boy, you gave us a lot to think about today, because I hope they don't remove her. I hope not.
Well, I think they may not pull it off. They may not pull it off.
How?
But the only way here's the thing. There's a lot of Republicans in the state Senate who are scared of this, right? Because in the assembly, in the state assembly, the state house, you only need a majority to impeach. It's not so hard to do it, right? You can lose some of the Republicans that are there and still impeach. But then it goes over the state Senate, and there you have a trial. That's where you're actually convicted or absolved. And in the state Senate, you need 2/3 majority. And that's right on the line of where the Republicans are. And there's several Republicans that have indicated that they don't want to go along with this. And so we have to be honest with ourselves. This falls to the Republicans, right? It is the question of whether there are some honorable Republicans who say, I'm just not doing this. One Republican has done it so far. Obviously, more will have to. But there's also the power of public opinion. And I can tell you, if you go around Wisconsin, there are just ordinary people who aren't particularly involved in politics, who will say to you, I just don't like the idea of throwing somebody out that got elected. And that has resonance. I mean, because Republicans, I think at least some of them fear that they might run up against a very angry electorate in 2024. And so I think it's possible that she doesn't get thrown out. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you, it's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. And this is where, it's kind of difficult to say this to people, but I bet you Reverend Uri and Daryl Jones will tell you that this is true. We ask a lot of people. We ask that they keep engaged politically. Well, the challenge is for a lot of folks, they've got families, they've got jobs, they've got other demands. Maybe they're not so healthy. Maybe there's other things going on in their lives. Mm. And at a certain point, they want these things to be settled, right? Well, in Wisconsin, it's never settled. It's constantly asking people to rise up and, you got to save this, you got to save that, you got to save the next thing. And I think one of the Republican strategies may be just to exhaust Democrats, right?
Because that's what chaos does, right? I mean, after a point, you're like, enough. Yeah. Look, what you will say, look, I don't even care what you do. Just let's just be done with it. You can understand that.
And that's happened around the world. It's happened in countries that we think of as quite enlightened, where they have just given up. Well, we can't give up in Wisconsin. The fact is, if we don't give up, there's a very good chance that the forces of light prevail. However, that is a danger. I think it's a danger in Ohio, where it's really tough to be a Democrat in Ohio because they've lost so many races. It's a danger in North Carolina. It's a danger in states across this country. And so, I'm so honored to be on with Daryl, because Daryl has this national perspective. He's working all over the country. And Reverend Uri, work with the Rainbow. They're working all over the country. They're seeing all of these fires popping up, right? They're running out there with the fire hose, trying to put out this fire, trying to put out that fire. But at the end of the day, what we desperately need is kind of a national vision of renewed democracy, of faith in democracy, in a sense that if you lose, you turn around and come back for the next election. Not if you lose, you figure out how to rig the rules so you never lose again.
Well, it just seems that this is, I think that you're right. But, I think that we've talked about saving the democracy so much that even that's, people are,
falls on tired ears.
Tired ears, because also there's just a lot that they're not doing to save the democracy. You've got to save the vote. Police need to be supported. Their power needs to be checked, and they need to be clear that their power comes from us. You got to get the Supreme Court in order. They can't police themselves, John. I mean, we're at an inflection point, I think, in just holding on to the republic. Isn't that what they said to Benjamin Franklin? He was very specifically asked, what kind of government have you given us? If you can keep it. Mm-hmm. He said, that's right. This is real hard. Constitutional monarchy, because all these people are founding fathers, everybody. They were all British. Remember that. Mm-hmm. They were not Americans. They evolved into that. And we're an evolving people. John, Dr. Uri, Attorney Jones, I don't know. I mean, I'm very excited about what's happening in Wisconsin, but I'm also just saying, okay, what's happening here? Just because, I'm hoping that they will not put her out. I don't put anything past these folks. I really don't, because this is about power for them. And I don't put anything past them. I don't. So, what's next? John?
Well, I can tell you in Wisconsin, what's next is, a great struggle going forward. But here's the interesting part of it. If this court ultimately does take up this issue, and if Justice Protasiewicz remains on the court, and they draw fair maps, not maps that are biased for the Democrats, but fair maps. If they draw fair maps, then 2024 is going to be a historic election in Wisconsin, an election in which potentially the people could get their will. And maybe they'll elect a Democratic legislature. Maybe they'll elect a Republican legislature. Maybe they'll elect a mixed legislature, some Democrats, some Republicans. But the bottom line is it will transform our politics because fair maps don't just decide November elections. They also change primary elections because suddenly winning the nomination becomes easier for a reasonable person. Somebody who says, my opponent's kind of extreme.
John, say that one more time. Why is getting just because we're not asking for anyone to be favored. We're asking for the people to be favored. Right. Just fairness. That's all.
That's right. That's right. The bottom line is that fair maps don't just decide November elections. They also have an impact on primary elections because in the primaries, you got to nominate somebody who can win in November. And so suddenly it becomes possible for a much more reasonable, more rational candidate to say, hey, you better not nominate my opponent because my opponent is so extreme, so out of touch with where the people are at, that if you nominate that person, he's going to lose, right? So this makes it possible for both parties to nominate more reasonable people. They may be very progressive, they may be very conservative, but you're going to be nominating people who can actually work with one another at the end of the day.
I got into it with this guy, Reverend Dr. Yeary and John and Attorney Jones. He was saying that, he was concerned about my brother Jonathan, building these relationships across party lines. I said, we're from Chicago. I said, I don't know how old you are, but we always had to work across the party lines because the people who opposed us most strenuously were the Democrats and the Democratic machine in Chicago. But also, as Black people, we've had to code switch, John. So we've had to figure out a whole lot of relationships to make this work. You had to negotiate with the slave master and with the slave master and mistress's community, on and on. We just always had to do that. I said, and like McCarthy's in the position of either keeping his seat and riding with MAGA, or he's going to have to cut a deal with Hakeem Jeffries so that the government is not shut down, so that, as Mitch McConnell has said, look, if we shut down the government, the people going to take the biggest hit are the Republicans. Think about that, Mr. McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy. I mean, hey, but you've got to get involved. You heard John say, wait a minute, the primaries matter. You got to be involved. Todd Yeary, are you still there with your popcorn? I don't know. He might have gone to court already. Attorney Jones.
People have duties and responsibilities,
and I know you do too. But I want to give you a chance to, to just to give us a closing thought, because I think that what's happening in Wisconsin, because everyone was so focused on that Supreme Court race, and quite frankly, the decision was so decisive, 55-45. Protasewicz, am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are, believe me, America's learning to say her name.
Yes.
But, even Wisconsinites had to learn, just so you know.
I can thank the Romance Languages Department at Howard University, because I had to sing in other languages. Boy, I can thank them for that. Because boy, we had dialect coaches. Well, but I mean,
kudos to those professors.
Well, yeah. but so I mean, so where are we here? I mean, I just want to know, just kind of like, where are we? Where are we? What's up?
We're like on the eve of a big game, a big sports game, or frankly on the eve of a war. I mean, whatever metaphor you want to use. Everybody's got their team together. Everybody's got their resources together. They're ready for the fight. But it's waiting to see what the Republicans do. Do they actually attempt to impeach Justice Protasewicz? They have suggested that they might. I think that suggestion is really an effort to intimidate her. It's an effort to scare her away from acting boldly on the court. I think the Republicans know that impeachment is unpopular, and so they would prefer not to do it. They would prefer not to cross that line. But if indeed they don't succeed in intimidating her, they may well cross that line. And at that point, then you have a great battle in Wisconsin, right? A struggle to avert this result. And what that will mean, quite frankly, is an effort to convince a portion of the Republican caucuses in the state House and state Senate to not do the wrong thing. right? And it isn't easy. We've had these fights before in Wisconsin. It doesn't always work out, but that's the reality of where we'd be. And the chairman of the state Democratic Party, Ben Wickler, has been very outspoken on this. He's raised a lot of resources. He's ready for that fight. Unfortunately, there are a lot of corporate interests, and that's why I brought up the labor issues here. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of corporate interests who, if they figure out a way to get that court on their side, they're going to come in with money and resources as well. So effectively, we have a situation where we just had an election in April, and if this impeachment goes forward, we're very likely to have the same sort of thing, not with an election, but same sort of statewide fight where everybody's all charged up on both sides, and it's a very intense moment. And again, as we suggested a moment ago, it's like we're asking people once more to get their fury up, to get their rage up. At a certain point, you run the risk of wearing people out. But I guess in truth, and you're right, you often reference this, and it's so true, that, we just can't be tired, right? We will be tired, but we can't let it overwhelm us. We can't let it shut us down, because there's people before us that have had to go through bigger struggles than this, and they've kept their faith, right? Absolutely. And so if you understand that, then it's a keep the faith moment.
You know what? I'll say this, for my portion as we get ready to go, and you, of course, can have the final word. I always knew when my father wanted to have a word with me, and it would unsettle me because when I was a little girl, I'm my father's and mother's eldest child. So starting when I was about 5 or so, he had a crew rolling with him, and they were security. After a point, pretty early on, I remember back in those days, I used to cry a lot. I would tell my mother, I don't want things to change. She said, baby, things change in life. And it became a little irritating for her, but I can only imagine, because my mother was like 24. She was a kid. And she was dealing with, she's looking at the increased threats on Dr. King's life that came to fruition. And then, and then her husband's running with this, running on the assignment from Dr. King. So I get it. But I remember one morning I was in high school. By this time, he had full-on official security. Chicago police were in front of our home 24 hours a day, and we had a security detail inside the house 24 hours a day. And the security detail inside of our house, they were like our Uncle Ben Reeves and people like that, Mr. Jesse Johnson, and on and on and on. But we were clear, they were, many of them were either former police officers, or they were police officers on their off time protecting our home, protecting us. So when my father would want to drive, John, and he wanted to take me to school by myself, I was very unsettled, because I was like, my father needs security, but my father wants to talk to me. Daddy, can we just wait at least for Uncle Saint to get here? And he was like, no, Daddy's going to take you to school this morning, because my school was an hour away, 45 minutes to an hour away by public transportation, a good 25, 30 minutes by car. So this particular morning, we're riding on Lakeshore Drive, and he was on his way to a meeting with the chairman of Standard Oil of Indiana. And I like to get to school every morning about 6:15 or 6:30. Why? Because I would have breakfast, and then I would go to the library. That was just my routine, and I really I didn't like breaking my routine at all. I didn't want to lollygag with my friends in the cafeteria. I just didn't have time for that, honestly. And so I'm riding in the car, and my father would try and do little things to kind of make me laugh, because he felt that I was just a little too serious, but I was around a lot of serious stuff, John. And my father said, do you notice anything about the buildings downtown, baby? I said, I'm looking, just trying to figure out where is my father coming from? Long story short, he said, you see the lights on, don't you? I said, no. He said, baby, they are on at the top. I said, oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. He said, yeah, I'm going over there to the Standard Oil building. I have a meeting with the chairman of Standard Oil of Indiana at 6:30 this morning. It's a breakfast meeting. He said, but that's the only time in his day and mine we could meet. So 6:30 in the morning is when our meeting is. He said, and it's great. He said, I love the fact that you want to get to school early. You'd like to get a jump on the day, blah, blah, blah. He said, let me tell you something. The people who run the world are up before everybody and they're in bed after everybody. He said, that is why Daddy works so hard. Because I'm having to work to counter a lot of what they do that can hurt you. Or I'm having to work with them to help you. But I can't let them outthink me. I can't let them outwork me. In fact, I have to outwork them. And that was always a joke when I bump into a captain of industry or the president of my university when I'm walking around the campus. Your father called me. It was 3:00 this morning, 4:00. You know it because you got those calls, John. He had an idea. He wants me to be on top of it. Boom.
Yeah.
And I only bring that story out because it was illustrative and it was like 40 years ago. I'll never forget it because really that's how hard we have to work to keep the republic. When Benjamin Franklin said, "Oh, a republic, if you can keep it." Remember, these men were British. It took Benjamin Franklin a lifetime to evolve into being an American. And in fact, his son remained British, although he was the governor of New Jersey, and their relationship broke apart on whether to be loyal to the crown or to become Americans, right? I think it's important, John, for us to know this and to understand the evolution of the American project and how we're still continuing to evolve in it and how hard it is to keep America together and to make it work, John. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about you. You're always giving us historical references. You'll go down the street and then you'll say, wait, but don't forget this part. And I'm like, oh, wow. I had forgotten that part, or should I file it away? And you're like, don't file it away. I mean, and why is it that you always contextualize everything in history, John? Why?
Well, I think because it's actually empowering, right? It tells us we've been here before and we've often won, right? It hasn't been easy, but we have prevailed. And it does two things. One, it helps us to be a little bit less overwhelmed. We think, oh, okay, I understand. It may not even be as bad now as it's been in the past, and yet our ancestors fought their way through this, and they got to something better. So that's the first thing. But number two, it also helps us to focus on those who actually did the right thing at the right time, who had courage. And I think that gives people courage in this time. I'll give you an example. Thomas Paine, the author of Common Sense, who really called this country to revolution in 1776, an essential founder. Well, why isn't Thomas Paine, why wasn't he at the Continental Congress? Why wasn't he at the Constitutional Convention? Why aren't there all sorts of big statues to him all over? Well, one of the reasons was he was also against slavery. And so at the founding of the country, there was somebody in that mix who did the right thing, who saw the right path. And so why do I celebrate Thomas Paine? I want people to remember that it's possible to be right even in the most difficult of times, even when it's challenging. And I think that inspires people, hopefully inspires people today to say, okay, I get it. I don't have to go quiet on some of the things that I care about. I can speak of them loudly. And the same is true all along the way. It's why I talk about A. Philip Randolph a great deal, because I think, we should know that A. Philip Randolph wasn't just on the March on Washington in 1963. He was fighting for racial justice and economic justice in 1917, right? It was decades and decades and decades. And he really gives us that sense of the long struggle. And it's why I focus on, living heroes like Dolores Huerta with the Farm Workers Union, who was, that woman has been doing the right thing now for longer than most of us have been alive.
Oh,
and
she's taken the
been
hits.
steady on it.
She's been steady on it, and she's taken hits. I mean, remember, she was with Robert Kennedy when he was murdered. She was right there.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that was, I can't even imagine how our parents got through 1968. I don't ask my parents about it too often because it's too painful for them, and I see it. I see the pain, and I don't like to see. I don't like to see it.
Yeah.
But even with that, I mean, because that was like that last spark of hope that people had. Dr. King had just been killed 6 weeks before. And we have this anti-war candidate who we think is going to not only end the war, but he's going to get to the bottom of what happened to his brother, because people didn't believe the Warren Commission. People thought that the change was really possible. And then they walk out of that cheering ballroom at the Ambassador Hotel, and he is shot minutes later in front of his pregnant wife, y'all. In front of his pregnant wife. She's, I just think it's important for us to look at all of those pieces. That's why even, when I look at Robert Kennedy Jr., named after his father, but after his father and mother had the sensitivity to name their brother after Joseph Kennedy, his brother who had been killed because he didn't live long enough to have a son. It's just when I look at them, I see them as a very human family, but I see a lot of courage, and I give him a lot of credit because, I've seen him struggle, and I appreciate people who've struggled and who've been very honest about it. That having been said, I am just looking for us to, like you said, not have an elevation, not have a coronation. We need a nomination. Because you don't need to turn Americans off right now, John. You got to turn Americans on.
Yep.
And we're in danger of turning people off, John. Turning people off.
Yeah.
And that, that's unsettling to me.
Yeah, look, it is, and again, it's that twofold thing. One, that fear of turning people off. Two, that fear of exhausting people. We ask an awful lot of people, and we gotta, and it's why I always say, and it's why we both should get off it pretty quick because we have other things to do, obviously. But it's why I always say, there's a certain duty to take care of yourself, right? Yeah. Make sure you don't get overwhelmed. Make sure all of us don't get overwhelmed, because at the end of the day, that's not a kindness to say that. It's not a sympathetic thing to say. It's an acknowledgement that this is ongoing struggle, and it's not going to be over, right? And so if you exhaust yourself to the point where you can't do anything more, that's problematic, because you can't come back tomorrow and do it again, right?
This is it.
And so we have to take care of ourselves so that we can keep at it, right? That we can keep coming back to these difficult struggles, keep coming back to these challenging issues, as overwhelming as it may be, because every day we're chipping away. Every day we are making progress. And if we don't believe that, you look at the circumstance of 50 years ago, you look at the circumstance of 100 years ago, what you realize is we have made immense progress. There is simply no question of that on every single issue. But every time we make progress, or somebody tries to push us back, right? And 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's just reality. What we have to make sure of it isn't 1 step forward, 2 steps back, right? We got to keep the equations on our side, right? We got to keep bending that arc, right? Keep bending that arc, so we get to, someplace decent, someplace humane, and we'll get there. I have absolute faith we will get there. Your father taught me that faith. Yeah. And I hold it very strong. And I don't think, I could be honest, I'm not sure your father taught it. I think your father was a vessel, right? Somebody who carried forward a deeper faith, a faith that's rooted, in my religious tradition, in actions of a couple thousand years ago, in other religious traditions, other actions, but this deep abiding faith that at the end of the day, good will come.
And as he said, America gets better and better and better and better. Keep hope alive. There it is. We keep getting better. We do. Might not look like it, y'all, but if you, what did Adam Clayton Powell say? Keep the faith, baby. Keep it.
That's right. That's right.
Sending you so much love, John. Oh, I always, if I could just keep you, I would. Oh, but I'm sending you so much love. Alex, once again, thank you for a great show. everybody in Morning Stars, thank you for a great, great, great show. Everybody, get out there, participate. The government belongs to you. It's up for and by you. It really, really is. And just get out there and participate. D. Ray, the Kennedy family, and Reverend Jesse Jackson, good friends. We've worked together down through the years. We've worked together down through the years. I mean, my parents, to be sure, have not endorsed anyone, but certainly they have been encouraging of everybody running and everybody having their say. And I must say, my mother has a bit of as a mother would, a bit of a soft spot for Robert Kennedy, and of course Cornel West. But she sees in Robert Kennedy, I think, a boy who was looking at television one night and then gets a call that his father's been killed, and how traumatizing that was for him. And then he sat with his father as his father asked the CIA, "Did you kill my brother?" Then he lived through his uncle almost being killed in a plane crash, and just the hits just kept on coming. And so, and yet he continues, and he became one of the top environmental lawyers in the world. In the world, y'all. Don't let the corporate media propaganda take you away from the great work that he has done. Don't let the corporate media tell you that Cornel West cannot win. Don't let the corporate media tell you that we all presumptively have a nominee. They're only testing you. They're only testing. We don't even know how. What questions are being asked of the electorate that gave us this 9-point spread between Biden and Trump? We don't know. You don't know. But I tell you what, nothing's determined until you vote. You got to get out there and vote. Vote. Vote, vote, vote. And give everybody a chance. And the corporate media, who you typically do not trust, don't trust them on the things that you really ought to, that you just shouldn't. You should find out what Marianne Williams' positions are. You need to find out what Robert Kennedy's positions are. You need to find out what Cornel West's positions are. You need to know what Trump's positions are. Vivek Ramaswamy. You need to know everybody. Nikki Haley, who's pulling in second in some of the polls. You need to know you need to know all these positions, not just dismiss people. And don't be so afraid. Oh my God, I can't let so-and-so back in office. Get out of here. What do you do if they get in? What if your worst nightmare comes to fruition? Do you stop fighting? No. You need to fight even harder. And without losing your principles, you need to negotiate with the person for whom you did not vote so you didn't get who you wanted, but you need to get what you need always. Even when you get who you want, you must get what you need. And that's a constant negotiation. That's politics. This is not a date, it's a destination. That's all. I love you, John. I love you, everybody. Have a good one. God bless you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Morning Stars. Love you, love you, love you. Like and share the show. Like and share the show. Like and share the show. D-Ray, go back to Friday's show. I had Cornel West on for 19 minutes. Yeah, he was on for a long time, good long time. And then he had a panel, with Dr. Gibbs and Dwight McKee. We had quite the show, and I was really touched that Dr. West said it was the best interview that he's had all season, because because he was able to speak and share his positions. And I'm working with Dennis Kucinich, the manager of the Kennedy campaign, to have Robert Kennedy on to do the same thing. I've already had Marianne Williamson on, and they can all come back, because I think that you deserve to hear from the people who want you to hire them. You deserve to hear from them. Don't shut any door. Keep them open and keep negotiating, everybody. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. I love you, everybody. Have a great, 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 great day. God bless you. Love you, John.
Love you too. Take very good care. Blessings on you.
Blessings to you. Blessings to you. Thank you so much. God bless.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.